Now, when you raise that question, I think it is the linchpin argument that anti-theists actually hold, and so as John has said earlier on, to deny that would be to be blinded to the felt reality of what this world is. You know, let me just give you a little bit of a personal anecdote on this, and then give you there's a philosophical side to it, there's an experiential side to it. Maybe let me start with the philosophical side. To raise the problem of evil, if you're a pure naturalist, is to actually invoke a category that is very hard to even justify. What does evil really mean? It doesn't mean anything other than pain and suffering. Because if God doesn't exist, sin is not a category. You know, moral absolutes are not categories. What we are really talking about is just pain and suffering and all that encompasses. This was actually the motivating factor for Gautama Buddha. The concept of Buddhism is built entirely on one word, dukkha. When Gautama Buddha saw old age and he saw suffering and he saw death, he began to search to find an answer. He was a Hindu at that time, and he felt in Hinduism the answer was not forthcoming, so he ended up with his Four Noble Truths and his Eightfold Path and all of that, but it's a non-theistic framework. Now, the problem, I think, with Buddhist philosophy in showing the emptiness only through dukkha and only through suffering is to miss a larger question. And I want you to listen to me carefully now. If meaninglessness came only from suffering, I could understand that. We also have to explain why ultimately meaninglessness comes from being weary of pleasure. Think about that. Meaninglessness of an ultimate nature comes from being weary of pleasure. It was Jack Higgins, the author of The Eagle Has Landed, who said, when you get to the top of the hill, you find out there's nothing there. Ted Turner from these parts made the comment that he was quite disconsolate in finding out that all you do is get to the top of the mountain and found you've got a bag full of holes. Boris Becker, after he won his third Wimbledon, was still basically struggling with the ideas of suicide. One of the great football players who used to play for Atlanta and then played baseball here for Atlanta, and then Deion Sanders, and then went on to play football for the Cowboys. Deion Sanders, in his testimony, makes the comment that the night they won the Super Bowl was the loneliest night of his life. He lay in bed saying to himself, this is what it was all about. He just got on the phone, ordered himself a Lamborghini or something like that, and he got everything he ever wanted. When he found out it wasn't there, one of the greatest hockey players Canada has ever produced, whom I know now, is a fellow by the name of Paul Henderson. Brilliant left winger, up and down that ice, and he scored the winning goal in that 7-game series against Russia. And he said, when he became a national hero, that's when he realized how empty he really was on the inside. So your question has got two parts to it. Meaninglessness does come from suffering, but we often forget meaninglessness also comes from the extraordinary fulfillment of pleasure, which leaves you empty. So here's my answer to you. When you say there's such a thing as evil, you must assume there's such a thing as good. When you assume there's such a thing as good, you must assume there's such a thing as a moral law on the basis of which to differentiate between good and evil. When you assume there's such a thing as a moral law, you must posit a moral lawgiver. But that's whom the anti-theists are trying to disprove and not prove. If there's no moral lawgiver, there's no moral law. If there's no moral law, there's no good. If there's no good, there's no evil. The question actually self-destructs. So the only way then is to find your question to be bridged with what John has just said. God is a benevolent God and a merciful God. In the very act of his own Son going to the cross is a revelation of the fact that sin by nature is destructive. You get into sin, it'll ultimately destroy you. Pain is the symptomatic expression of that which is broken on the inside. Very close to where you and I are standing is a young girl in Georgia who happens to have a disease that only a handful of people in this world have. It is called the desensitization to pain with anhidrosis. What it really means is they're not able to feel pain, and their perspiration glands do not work. They're not able to perspire. It's a very rare form of disease. One of those who has it in the state of Georgia. I'm trying to remember her name. She's about 13 or 14 years old or something now, of that age now. Her mother said their life has been agony because she feels no pain. They have to keep somebody watching her. If she touches a live stove, she doesn't know it. If she bangs her body against a sharp stone when she's playing some kind of sport and cuts her arm and doesn't know it, she could bleed to death. They always have to have somebody watching her so that she will be alerted if she has injured herself and she herself is desensitized to pain. The interesting thing is the mother says every night she and the family go to bed and pray, God, please give our daughter back the ability to feel pain before we lose her because she cannot feel it. If the physical symptoms tell us that pain is a symptom of something that's wrong, I think we need to accept it, that pain in the inner man is a symptom that something is wrong between us and God. God provides for us the help, the sustenance, the strength, and in His mercy, we in America are so blessed, we're turning against God. A place like India, with so much deprivation, where religion is so rife. I give you words of him and then a personal illustration, and that's it. A woman who was born to a home where she was soon orphaned, was then adopted by another family. She was born Annie Johnston. She became Annie Johnston Flint. She contracted rheumatoid arthritis. Her body was bent over in pain most of her life. She spent most of her years in bed till her body was covered from head to toe with sores. When the last eyewitness saw her, she needed 8 pillows to cushion the sores on her body. Cancer and blindness had taken its toll by now. Orphaned, rheumatoid arthritic, cancerous, blind, head to toe with sores. She wrote this: He giveth more grace when the burdens grow greater. He sendeth more strength when the labors increase. To added affliction He addeth His mercy. To multiplied trials His multiplied peace. When we have exhausted our store of endurance, when our strength has failed ere the days half done, when we reach the end of our hoarded resources, our Father's full giving has only begun. His love has no limit, His grace has no measure, His power has no boundaries known unto men. For out of His infinite riches in Jesus, He giveth and giveth and giveth again. That's the benevolence. One anecdote for practical reasons. About 3 weeks ago, I was in Delhi. Delhi is my home city. I was walking through downtown, a place called Connaught Place, opposite a cinema called Regal Cinema. And I just bought something, my hands were full, and as I came out, I saw a man. For those of you who've seen the movie Slumdog Millionaire, you'll see these sights are not that uncommon in some places. And he lay on a contraption that somebody had made for him with 4 wheels. His right leg was gone. His left leg was in a cast from his hip down to his toes. He had 2 pads that he held onto his hands that were worn out from pushing himself. He looked so emaciated and so pitiful. And as I was walking past him, I looked at him and my heart just sank, and I walked by. And I thought to myself, how can I do that? How can I do that? The problem in a setting like that is you do it for one, and before you know it, there's 20, 30 surrounding you, and you can't even get out of there. And I walked back, and I just got on my haunches and looked down at him. I put my hand in my pocket. I took out a bill, which is a lot of money for him, but small for us. It was a 100-rupee note, which is about $2. I scrunched that 100-rupee note in my hand, looked at him and looked into his eyes, and opened his palm and put it into his hand so that nobody else would see it. He craned over like that, and he saw it was 100 rupees. He was desperately trying to grab me, and he said, Khuda aapko bhala kare, Sahib ji, which literally means, revered sir, may God richly bless you. He had so little. He recognized that gift as a gift from God. Those of us who are believers are God's hands in benevolence to lighten